Viscoplastic Energy Model and Business Management Part 2, number 1634, the 8th of May 2026, Gerald C. EclaireMD Foundation, category, VPT and Management. From FEM to VPT, a unified systems philosophy. Today's realization also connected several different parts of my life into one coherent systems philosophy, FEM from mid-aerospace engineering. Viscoplasticity from mid-mechanical engineering, Silicon Valley high-tech organizational management. VMT biomedical energy modeling, topology application on pathophysiology. A soft branch of medicine. Neuroplastic stroke recovery, and dynamic nonlinear systems analysis. These were not isolated disciplines. They all emerged from the same underlying systems thinking structure, decomposition of complexity. Trajectory analysis, accumulated loading, nonlinear adaptation, and delayed phase transition. This may partially explain why my biomedical research methodology differs substantially from conventional statistical medicine. Traditional statistics are extremely useful for population averages, probability estimation, and broad epidemiology. However, my work has focused more on longitudinal system behavior, individual trajectory, energy accumulation, geometric pathway, and nonlinear system transition. This eventually led to the development of VPT viscoplastopology. Within VPT, VMT describes energy magnitude at specific time instances, topology describes overall geometric movement direction, and together they form a unified longitudinal systems interpretation. In simple terms, VMT measures how much accumulated system energy exists, topology measures how does the system move geometrically through multidimensional space. VPT combines both how much energy moves along what pathway, and how does the system evolve over time. An example of pivot point, CEO have me to heart attacks occurred shortly before my resignation from the CEO role and the beginning of the sell-off process of Avant. In many ways, this became a major pivot point in the organizational trajectory of Avant Corporation. In reality, CEO health can significantly influence organizational stability, strategic decisions, employee confidence, customer trust, investor psychology, and long-term corporate direction. However, in order to minimize damage and maintain market confidence, CEO health information is usually treated as one of the top corporate secrets. Of course, there are many other forms of hidden pivot point information that may strongly influence organizational trajectory, but never appear directly in financial reports. Conclusion: today's realization may become one of the most important conceptual connections in my recent research journey. What began decades ago as VMT in mechanical engineering and FEM in aerospace engineering from it in the early 1970s, later evolved into systems engineering in Silicon Valley high-tech ventures, and finally became biomedical trajectory analysis, VMT, and VPT. Only now do I fully recognize that these disciplines were connected all along through the same underlying systems philosophy. Real-world systems, including organizations, biomedical systems, engineering structures, and even neurological recovery are rarely linear. They are nonlinear, dynamic, time-dependent, path-dependent, and continuously shaped by accumulated loading history. Traditional KPI systems, like traditional statistical medicine, remain useful because they simplify reality into understandable metrics. However, the deeper truth underneath is often far more complicated. My own biomedical research experience taught me that long-term trajectory matters more than isolated snapshots, accumulated stress matters more than temporary appearance, and delayed nonlinear transition often determines the final outcome. Today, I realize that business organizations may behave in remarkably similar ways. Perhaps future management science, like future medicine, will eventually move toward more dynamic and nonlinear systems-based understanding, which does not merely measure isolated outputs, but instead understands long-term system evolution itself. My next paper will involve an actual calculation using a hypothetical dataset to simulate a real high-tech business management environment in order to compare the differences between VMT and traditional KPI models. The paper shows that the same structural principles I use in VMT, accumulated loading, delayed transition, nonlinear adaptation, hysteresis, strain rate sensitivity, and path dependency map directly onto organizational behavior. This is not analogy, it is structural equivalence. Epilogue: after completing my 3 papers yesterday on FEM, cognitive SIT, and VMT-based business management, I gradually realized that all 3 studies actually originate from the same underlying systems thinking. Architecture inside my mind, although these papers involve three very different fields: engineering, finite element method, neuroplasticity, brain medicine, and business management. Viscoplasticity. The deeper conceptual structure behind them is remarkably similar. Throughout my life, I have consistently viewed complicated systems through decomposition, interaction, dynamic evolution, accumulated loading, nonlinear adaptation, and long-term trajectory behavior. This way of thinking probably began during my mid-years studying mechanical engineering DMT-related concepts and aerospace engineering FEM, and was later further enhanced through my business management experiences in Silicon Valley. Later, it continued evolving through computer science studies at Iowa, AI machine learning, and pattern recognition studies at MIT, system development, and semiconductor chip design during my 20 entrepreneurial years in Silicon Valley. 14 years of high-tech business management at Sun Microsystems, Cadence, and Avant, and eventually biomedicine self-study and research starting in 2010 after experiencing 8 major health crises since 1994. Yesterday's 3 papers helped me realize something important about myself. I do not naturally think within traditional academic disciplinary boundaries. Instead, I tend to focus on the deeper systems architecture shared across different domains, which society often treats as independent silos. That is why I can move relatively naturally between FEM engineering, organizational management, biomedical systems, stroke recovery, neuroplasticity, and even zoology, geopolitics, war history, and psychology. I am not simply transferring terminology from one field into another. I am transferring the underlying systems philosophy and structure, including interaction, trajectory, accumulated stress, delay transition, and dynamic adaptation over time. Perhaps this also explains why my medical research methodology differs substantially from most traditional medical approaches. My thinking was not originally trained inside medicine. Instead, it was fueled over many decades through multiple academic disciplines and long-term observation of complex dynamic systems in real life. Disclaimer: I write this paper not for fame, but to share what I have learned so others can understand their health, prevent disease, and live longer, healthier lives. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No. Doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article and its related materials belong to the author, Gerald C. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article and its related materials belong to the author, Gerald C.